Hello and welcome to another fantastic audio tutorial. My name is Dave Bodie for Tuts Plus, and thanks so much for checking out this video. In this video, we're going to pick up where we left off in the last video in this series about producing an EP. So to catch you up, I wanted to show you a quick list of the songs that we are going to be checking out throughout this series. In case you miss a part of the series, you can kind of get a global perspective of the name of the songs and who we'll be referencing throughout this series. So this is an EP for a group called Patmos. They're a Christian music group. So these are the songs that we'll be looking at throughout this series of videos. Most of these songs are written by members of the Patmos group. Jeff Parshall here is the director. So you can see that he was influential in a lot of these songs, as well as other members of the group. The only one that isn't an original is Great Is Thy Faithfulness, which is an older hymn based on a poem written by Thomas Crisholm in 1923, and that was arranged by Pete Donato, which we may get to in an upcoming video. Not all of these are going to have kind of a full music treatment arrangement. Some of them are more scaled down. Specifically, Great Is Thy Faithfulness is going to be just real basic acoustic guitars, maybe a drum or a shaker, something real basic, not anything too complicated. Be Near is one that we looked at in the first video, and that's going to be pretty stripped down as far as the instrumentation. And then Living Word, My Soul is Satisfied, Glorious, and Set Afire are all going to be somewhat more fully orchestrated and arranged with drums, percussion, guitar, synths, pads, and the like. That just gives you an idea in case you miss any of the other videos in the series. These are basically the songs that we're going to be looking at, so that if I reference one of them in an upcoming video, you'll at least hopefully have an idea of where that fits into the whole scheme of this EP here. So we'll be hearing a lot of Jeff's voice and Jeff playing guitar, and he'll also be kind of co-producing this with me and helping to guide the creative direction for this project. So in the last video, we looked at creating scratch tracks, and we got a little bit into tracking some acoustic guitars. And we also touched on some of the logistical things about producing a project like this, things that you need to keep in mind so that you don't overcommit yourself and things of that nature. In this video, we are going to be checking out how we recorded electric guitars for a few of these songs. So in this song called My Soul is Satisfied, we have more electric guitars than probably most of the other songs that are in this EP. Some of the songs are really stripped down. A couple of them are just acoustic guitars, and only a handful of them have electric guitar tracks. Again, because of the time and the budget for this project, I had the guitarist come in. His name's Evan Thorpe, and if you've seen the first video in the guitar tone series that I produced for Tuts Plus, you will recognize Evan there. And so I had him come in and just plug in direct. And then what I did is I set up a couple of virtual guitar rigs here. And even though I have Guitar Rig, Native Instruments Guitar Rig, which is very good, it's one of the best guitar amp emulators or simulators out there, I used this one called Amplification 1 from Kuasa, and I also used Vermilion from Kuasa because I really like this setup. It's extremely flexible, and I also covered this in a previous tutorial as well that you can check out. And so how we did the guitars is he just plugged directly into my interface here with a 1/4-inch cable, and I armed these tracks for recording. And then what I did is I turned record monitoring on, and this allows the signal to come through, but it goes through the effects chain so that he could hear exactly what was happening with the guitar amp. And so basically for all of the tracks that we do, we'd spend a few minutes kind of dialing in the amp sound. We get it close, and then he left it up to me to kind of tweak it out later. And mostly what we do is kind of adjust the gain and the distortion and a tiny bit of the EQ, just real rough end kind of stuff. Because I know he likes to play his own personal setup with a lot of spring reverb for a lot of the tracks, I used Kuasa's Vermilion, Amplification Vermilion. And so I cranked up the spring reverb there as well, but I also put a track in here. I believe if we check the IO, no, not on these. Some of them I did. Oh, I may have deleted it for this one. I put another channel in here, and then what I would do is I would put a real basic reverb in here. So I happen to like this RC48 here by Native Instruments, and I would just dial up something like Large Hall, and then I would just drag down one of his guitar tracks to it. And so this way, and I'd also name this. And so this way, as he was playing, he'd get a very similar feel to playing with an amplifier and his pedals, because he likes a lot of very wet, kind of ambient stuff, and that's totally fine. And doing it this way doesn't bake in all of that jazz, so we have a tremendous amount of control afterwards. So he's hearing what he wants to hear, but I'm getting what I want to hear, because all of these guitar tracks are completely dry. Check it out. You put the amp on, we add a little verb, and we're already there. I mean, it's so fast that, you know, for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to mess around with miking a guitar amplifier unless we're going for something extremely specific. And given the scope of this project, this worked out just fine. Now, a couple of things didn't work out fine. At the beginning of this particular song, he wanted to do this swell thing, right? Which is what you're hearing right here. Now, for those of you who are eagle-eared listeners, so to speak, you'll be hearing a couple of things in here. One, you are hearing buzz because he played on his Telecaster and used one of the single coil settings and not grouping the neck and the bridge pickup together. His guitar had some buzz. Also, these swells are not remarkably consistent. And that's totally fine for a live setting, especially with a bit of compression. We could have evened those out a lot and made them perfectly acceptable. The problem is that we'd still have the buzz. So at first, what I thought is, you know, after he laid that down, I was like, that's fine. We have it. We can use it. You know, I can massage that up and get it usable if I need to. But also what I want to have you do is I want to have you just play all the chords, and I'll just have you hit, you know, each chord for 2 measures. So that's what he did right here. And he just let these ring out. And the idea was, afterward, I would go back through and I would just automate the volume levels. But there were 2 problems. One, it's still buzzy, which you can hear in there, which may not be a huge deal in the mix. I'm really weird about that though. The second one was I had him do all the chords twice, except that he missed one of the key chords. I believe this song is in the key of C, and in the intro and then the interlude, there's a 5 chord. Actually, there's a 5-6-4 suspension chord, and then there's a 5 chord. So it's a G 6-4 suspension, and then there's a G chord, and he didn't play either of those chords. So as I was automating those, I got to the end and I was scratching my head going, where are those chords? So what I ended up doing was I just recorded those chords myself. I'll show you what that sounds like over here. And what I did was I just recorded all the chords as a separate clip, because honestly, I couldn't remember what the chord progression was exactly. And so I recorded all of the chords here on my Line 6 Variax, which uses a piezo pickup element on each one of the strings and then emulates 25 different classic guitars. And I have a Telecaster setting in there. And for those of you who are like, boo, that's not a real guitar. Well, you should just listen here. Here's the Telecaster. And then here's my guitar. Now the Variax that I was using is actually emulating a Telecaster from the 60s, so it might have a slightly different tone, but they are remarkably similar. And so the tone of it was awesome, and check out the end here. No buzz, 0. It's completely clean because they don't use magnetic pickups. The signal coming out of the guitar is really, really hot, so if there was any amount of buzz in there, which I don't think there is, it's overcome by the huge signal to noise ratio. And so that's what I did for this guitar part right here. I'll turn the effects back on here. You can see I'm using Kawasa amplification Vermilion again with a little bit of compression here. And then all I did was automate the volume levels so that right on beat 1, it goes down to 0. And then I think on the 2nd 16th note of beat 6, it goes from 0 decibels back down to 1. And so like this, it kind of sounds funny. You can see what the compressor's doing, which is doing a good job of, as soon as the chord hits, it kind of smushes it and then slowly releases it, which gives kind of a pad sound, which is very cool. But the thing that makes this really sing is this down here. The delay, which if we look in the I/O here, you will see that I have this in guitar delay short and electric reverb, which are two other channels that I set up and then sent this guitar to. The guitar delay short is this guy right here, and this has basically just one feedback repeat, so it doesn't trail on forever. But you add some nice long reverb and a little bit of delay, and you get this. Which is a very cool effect. So that's how we cleaned up that guitar. Basically, I redid it, but that's pretty much the only thing that I cleaned up. The other stuff here, I basically just used, and we did it for this particular song is we recorded a lot of stuff and then we trimmed back stuff that we didn't need. So I had him do, when it kind of builds up in the bigger section, I had him do kind of 2 takes of these chords here, and this is one of them. And then this is the other one right here. And the idea was so that we could put them on 2 different amps, and I had 2 different takes to work with. And so if we listen to what that sounds like, they're kind of hard panned right and left. It sounds really, really cool. And then he recorded some other parts here. He did this this little lead line here. And he came up with the lead line. And I was like, oh, you know, it'd be really cool is if you slid up to the octave, which he was already thinking as well, on the second repeat of the phrase. And then what I was thinking was, oh, I'll just double the lower octave and we'll have it in this cool octave thing. And this is in the scratch track version, so it's not, you know, all affected up here. But if we jump over to the current state of the project, you can hear how that sounds here with these 2. Little subtle delay. Really, really helped to sell that stuff. So a lot of this is, you know, because of time and we couldn't agonize over every decision, what we would do is we just record a bunch of stuff. You know, we recorded some different lead line options. We recorded some different arpeggio options in here as well. And then the idea was we'll sort it out later. You know, he did kind of a 2-note thing for the last chorus, and then he did a 3-note arpeggiated thing with a little bit different kind of variation as far as the voicing of the notes. And, you know, we just mix it up. And then what I would do is just kind of cut and paste stuff as I needed it. So originally, we jump back here one more time, he recorded this kind of swell thing here. This is before we recorded vocals. He did this kind of swell thing here on his volume pedal, which was the only other thing that he plugged into. So basically he was in his guitar and then he went through his volume pedal to do these swells, and that's pretty much it. And even though those weren't all super consistent, you know, and that's like a really critical thing because I'm sure they're just fine in the scope of the mix. When you listen to them soloed, you know, you can detect little anomalies here and there. And so what I did was I took that and then I used that here and there with the swell thing that I did. So in the beginning here, it's just this one guitar swell part. And then over here in the chorus, what I did is I used that same little bit that he recorded and I put it in stereo, so we get this kind of effect. It has a really cool kind of split voicing effect where we have this track basically doing all chords in their lowest position. And then we have this doing little 2-note harmonies here and there, or 3-note harmonies. And when you pan these hard left and hard right, it has this really cool effect. It's like the coolest guitar pad sound. And you know it's not completely sterile because this one has some anomalies and some slides in there and some other extraneous noises, which I think is cool. It kind of adds a little bit of texturing in there. And then I did the same thing at the end. I basically just copied and pasted over the parts that I needed for the same exact effect here for the ending bit. And it worked out really great. This stuff right here is just left over for me to show you basically what was going on with those electric guitars there that we adjusted. It worked out really well. The idea behind holding the chords for twice as long as necessary is if I needed to punch one of them in somewhere, you know, as a downbeat chord or something, I would have it. So right here, coming out of the interlude, I can let the tail of that kind of hang over because it ends on a 4 chord, and then it starts on a 4 chord here. So I can just kind of let this hang out over here and, you know, adjust the volume envelope. But if I only had a measure of that, then, you know, I wouldn't have that option. And especially at the very end here, I'm using the whole length of the chord here for the very end. And it works out really well. So really simple ideas, you know, recording direct using a great amplifier emulator. I am a big fan of that Kawasa, both the Amplification 1 and Amplification Vermilion. I think they sound awesome. They're super easy and, you know, compared to a lot of the other products out there, they're extremely cheap. They're very, very good. Now they don't come with delay or reverb, but they come with just a boatload of options. And if you're interested in finding out more, check out my tutorial on the Kawasa Amplification 1 for more info on that. All right, so really quick, let's check out another track here. For this one, we'll check out the drums. This one is Living Word, and the current state of this one is not as put together as the last one that we looked at, as My Soul Satisfied. It's basically just kind of roughed in with some vocals, drums, and bass, with a little bit of electric guitar in here as well. So I'll take you through what we recorded. First, we'll look at the electric guitars here. You can see very conveniently I have those in a track group or track folder here. This track is, you know, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. At some point in tracking the electric guitars, I had Evan switch over to use my Line 6 Variax because of the hum on his guitar and because I have some more kind of tonal options on that guitar as it emulates a bunch of different guitars. So if we wanted a fatter sound, you can see this one is Les Paul, so it has a much bigger, beefier sound than a Telecaster. And then again, for the amplifier stuff, we used Kawasa Amplification 1, and you can see for all the tracks that we record, whoa, that's gigantic. For all the tracks that we record, before we record them, we make sure that everything is in tune, especially if they're using a capo or something. I want to make sure that before we do any new tracks that we just do a quick tune check to just make sure, because if there's any kind of weird anomalies in there, we want to catch that before we lay down a whole bunch of stuff. And then for some of these tracks, something that can help in the tracking process to give it a little bit more of a natural, what you might call organic feel, is I put a compressor before the amplifier, just to do some real light compression and help to even things out a little bit. That's one of the things that you get kind of when you're playing on an amplifier, especially a tube amplifier. And if you are using a bunch of pedals, that combined with the way that your ear works will add perhaps a little bit of compression before it reaches the amplifier. So sometimes it can sound just a little bit harsh and a little bit too dynamic to just go straight into an amplifier emulator or simulator like this. And so just to take off a little bit of the edge and even things out, sometimes it helps to put a compressor in when you're tracking. Again, you can see that record monitoring is on. I didn't turn it off on any of these, but it doesn't really matter at this point. But when that's on, it goes through this whole chain here so that the guitar player will get the effect of having a bit of compression before it hits the amplifier, which is in the real world when you're playing live, that's a very natural thing. And then again, we just dialed up a couple of different options here in amplification 1 until we got the right thing. A lot of them are using a really similar setup to what Evan actually already uses. So one of his go-to pedals for overdrive is the Ibanez Tube Screamer. You know, it's a pretty standard guitar pedal, and that is what this little green overdrive box emulates. And so that going into kind of a clean channel of a guitar amplifier is something that he's very used to. So that worked out very, very well. And then we just did a little bit of adjustment down here with these microphones and the cabinet selection to get a tone that he was comfortable with. For a lot of these, we just spend a few minutes dialing these in. And then because he wanted this kind of tremolo pan thing on this guitar too, I also added this little free plugin here, this trem pan. It's actually in pan mode right now to give it this kind of effect. It would also work in tremolo mode. I kind of like it in pan mode though. I think it's pretty cool sounding. And so, you know, just real simple stuff. And I think what I had him do is double this guitar part. And then this one is in the right and this one is in the left. Even though it says that it's centered, it has automation on it, which you can see right here. It has pan automation, which you can see. Wow, you can see there's just a boatload of automation available. But right up here, you can see pan is armed and visible there, and it's set to right. So it has this really cool kind of stereo effect when you put all these guys together here. It just helps to give everything a little bit more space, and this should sound fine in mono as well. A lot of times what I do when I record stuff like that in stereo is I don't just play it twice, I play it twice and I use two different pickups or two different guitar models on the Variac. So I'll use maybe a Tele for one and a Strat for the other, just to give it a little bit different coloration. And I believe we have the exact same amplifier setup. Yeah, these actually have the same amplifier setups. So they do sound similar, but I do like to get the two different guitar sounds in there just to give a little bit more tone, and that'll help too if you have to collapse it down to mono. Having two different, slightly different guitar tones in there should help things kind of settle out in the phasing. And so a track like this, really pretty standard kind of stuff. There's just a couple little twinkly notes here and there. Anchor for my soul, when waters rise. Jesus, living word, be the light that guides us, shining through the. So just real simple stuff. Little arpeggio action here. Just chunking out some chords. Now, a lot of times for this kind of chordy stuff, it can be a little bit more delicate to get the amplifier dialed in just right. But I think the sound that we used initially for this opening hook here also worked for this as well too. But sometimes that can be a little bit harder to kind of balance. But again, because we recorded all these dry, we can tweak the heck out of those. But the amp settings that we settled on, I think work really, really good. So we didn't have to mess with it too much. This one was pretty quick to record. Just laid these down, and that was that. Coming up in the next video, we are going to be taking a look at some drum programming for these tracks, talking about what we did and how we approached programming the drums for this project. Thanks so much for checking out this video. Again, my name is Dave Bodie for Tuts Plus, and we'll see you around. Thanks for watching.